That's how we've portrayed ourselves on all the podcast world, is that we're both these absolute hunks of men,
Well, we
because then nobody actually has to see what we truly look
But,
like, you see.
but surely you want to put this out on video because you've got your backdrop, you've got your little
yeah.
day pot.
Well,
It's
the truth is, it was last week's episode. Well, we recorded and we just admitted, that Dan looks like Billy Bunter. So we got, and he said I looked like Orson Welles at the time. So it was Orson Welles and Billy Bunter.
Yeah.
that's
I had
quite
a lot more
mix.
hair then.
Yeah.
Boo-Foons, mystery investigators.
Welcome to the Boo-Foons Mystery Investigators. I'm Dan.
And I'm Steve.
And today we are joined by a very talented person. We are joined by Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Now, Chris, you are sound engineer and general expert on all things like that. And you've also had some experiences that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to have, hopefully, get your insight into sound recording and the paranormal a little bit as well. So would you like to tell our audience anything about you, where they may know you from, and plug anything that you wish to plug,
Oh, I
e.g.
love it.
your music?
No, straight in, acknowledging that it's a plug. I love that. So my name's Chris. You may know me from Bartians. I was a sound recordist for Bartians 1.0. If you're into strange experimental music, you might know me as Bone Music. And if you can somehow see into the future, you might also know me as 50% of French Ray, which is an industrial folk band. No, I shall not be elaborating on that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that and talk about if that's okay with you. And
Mhm.
if you want to talk about your friend who did the most haunting thing, I don't know if you want to most haunted. I don't know if you want to break anyone's illusions with that, but it'd be interesting.
I don't know if people have illusions around a show like that, because if you ever watch anything like Most Haunted, what you see is a bunch of people who've got themselves really riled up. And even when we worked with Biffo, when we were in the in Drakelow tunnels, you start to feel freaked out because you're in an environment where you expect to feel freaked out. And I'm not saying that there was no activity there, but I think when you're so heightened, there's two things that can happen. One is you're more attuned, so if anything does happen, you're more likely to see it. But the other is, someone closes a door in three rooms away, and you jump because you think, oh God, what was that? And I think it is just because you're in that mindset. And that's why people get hypnotized, isn't it? You go with a mindset when you're expecting something to happen, and then it becomes true because you expected it. I think that's quite common.
I do. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I did a ghost hunt last weekend, and there were people there just convinced it was all haunting. There was nothing.
Mm.
There was nothing. As an observer, but they were convinced something was happening everywhere. And I think
Did you
they
see
just convinced
anything or
themselves.
feel anything?
Nothing
Or...
at all. Nothing at all. Didn't feel anything. Never do. I don't think I'm open to that kind of thing anyway. I think my brain doesn't rest enough to let that kind of feeling in, I think.
I mean, I have been in environments where it's felt like a bad vibe, and that's where maybe there's been experiences as well. So when I was in a band in the 90s, or basically I was helping out sound for a band in the 90s, and one of the rehearsal studios we'd go to was an old warehouse in Liverpool, and it had a really bad energy around it, but it was used to like keep slaves in when they were in transit. So this is a place that's got a really awful history, and I didn't know if I necessarily believed in ghosts as such, but one day I was sat on an amp and something very physically grabbed me by the shoulders and pulled me back. And I wasn't riled up, I wasn't expecting anything, I wasn't on edge, but all I can say is something grabbed me and physically moved me, and there was nobody there. So I've seen like a ball aura, kind of, I don't know what you call it, like a light manifestation floating around before, stuff like that, and they're usually associated with unusually bad energy. And you know, I come from a science background, and I've gone through times, because I've got quite black and white thinking, I've gone through times in my life where I've been very cynical and very non-believing. But I think the reality is there's just things out there that we do not understand yet. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's ghosts, but whatever it is, you know, there are things that we just don't understand. And I think that's okay. And science is an evolving and progressing field.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what we tend to discuss after we've you know, the things we've heard on here and the things we've experienced. That's what we kind of think as well. We're talking, you know, these are just areas of science we just don't know yet. You know, these are just natural phenomena we can't classify.
But I was thinking about this recently, and if you think about the way we experience the world, we are not directly experiencing the world. We get a bunch of electrical signals into our body through our senses, and the brain has to interpret them. And because of that interpretation, the brain is using things like prior knowledge. If you think about, like, you know, there's been studies where train drivers have gone through red lights because every day for months it's been green. They've seen green. It's not even a lack of attention. It's the brain is partly using the data that's coming in, but partly using prior experience. And it's the same like with your vision. You have blind spots in your vision, like where your nose is, but also where your optic nerve attaches to the back of your eye. That is a blind spot. There's no lights, as far as I understand it, there's no light sensing cells there. Your brain is interpolating that. And it's when you realize that a lot of what we experience is reality, but a lot of it is actually interpreted through this filter of the brain, that it's very easy to see how you might end up with assigning meaning to things that aren't actually meaningful. And I think, you know, that's part of unexplained phenomena. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but I think that is possibly part of it.
Yeah, with that, I once tried to trick my brain into actually being able to see my nose, because, like you said, it is a blind spot. It is a known thing that actually we can see our nose. We just our eyes are just, our brain is just cancelling it out. And I did actually manage to sit there after about an hour of trying to actually get to the point where I could see it, and then it then made me feel sick. Yeah.
Hold on a second. You can't see your nose. Because I see my nose all the time.
But it should be like blocking out a bit of your vision, because it's quite prominent in this part of your field of vision. Yeah. But your brain is to some extent filling that in with data.
See, I'm wondering, because I've only got one eye that works, I've got no optical nerve that developed. My optical nerve didn't really develop in my left eye. So I've got no real vision out there. I'm just wondering if the right eye that does work has compensated, which allows me to like see my nose and the bridge here. I can see that, and I can see my nose all the time. And I wonder if it's because this vision doesn't work.
Potentially. So if normally the way we work is we have two sort of circles of vision from the two eyes, and there's no overlap there, and the brain is making sense of all that. But if you don't have that overlap because one of your eyes isn't providing that data, then potentially you're seeing a bigger circle from the eye that does work. So maybe that means you are just seeing a bit more of your nose. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's been a long time since my biology level.
Well, there's that thing that you can do where if you get a kitchen roll tube or a toilet paper tube and put it up on one eye and then hold your hand up in front of the other, you actually, because of the way the brain interprets the two different signals from the eyes, your hand ends up with a massive hole in it. So as you'll look at, so if you get the empty roll of the middle of a kitchen roll tube and hold it up to one eye and then hold your hand up, because of the way your brain interprets the data from the two different eyes, you end up with it's looking at your hand, and your hand's got a huge hole in it, and you can see through your hand, and it's just purely that compensation. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing though? The brain is having to fill in from incomplete data.
Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, I feel like in some senses we're relatively simple creatures, but in other ways it's actually remarkable the way we function and the way how complicated our systems are. And you know, those systems are so complicated, it's not actually a surprise sometimes that maybe you get a bit of a malfunction and you see something there isn't there. I mean, we're also always trying to make sense of patterns, aren't we? So you see faces in forests, in wallpaper, in the speckles that you see when it's pitch black outside. You see faces that aren't there because your brain's trying to assign meaning to signals that don't necessarily have any meaning. And it's creepy and I don't like it, but it doesn't mean them being, you know, haunted by a woodland elf. It just means that the brain is trying to assign a pattern to something.
I was reading about infrasound, and how it can cause hallucinations.
Oh, that's
Have you ever
interesting.
had that? Because obviously places, I don't know, are there any wind turbines near there that could have been producing infrasound, for example?
Potentially, is that low or high frequency? Infra, that would be
I think it's low. It's
low
too low
frequency.
to be heard, but it's there. It's
Because there's
below
a lot,
20 hertz, I think it is.
like, I mean, I'm sure, as you know, we don't hear anything below 20 hertz, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And
Yep.
you know, maybe you can feel it, and certainly it's something that's been used. It's been weaponized at times as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Well, didn't they recently use that? One that I think I saw that recently used as crowd control in a country somewhere, and it cleared the entire street in seconds.
Well,
The infrasound,
North Korea were there's, so you know, between in Korea there's like a buffer zone, like a sort of no man's land, and
Yes.
to stop people from the other side crossing, they were playing. What they did is, through research, they figured out what the most unsettling sounds were for humans, and it was all like distressing noises, like distressing frequencies, but also things like crying, wailing, whatever. But where it gets really weird is, I didn't know this, and I was in the car with my husband, and because I like weird experimental music, in fact I make weird experimental music, he puts this track on and I'm like, man, this is sick, who is this? And it turns out it was actually the weapon that Korea was using, and that was really vibing with it. And I was like, oh man, I love this. It's so unsettling. And it's like, this is what Korea are using to clear the disputed zone. It's not actually a band. I would go to this gig. I like this.
So, talking about your job, obviously working with booms and everything, you record lots and lots of things. So, have you experienced anything weird on the detections? So, I'm not talking you've worked on something like most paranormal show at the moment. I'm talking about just general work. You're out doing something, like it could just be recording a presenter talking about something. Have you ever detected anything that you shouldn't have detected on the sound at all, that's just been there out of randomness?
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes you get little things like, I won't name him, but there's an actor I work with quite a lot who, he's got like a weird gurgle in his throat, and I don't know if it's like, I don't think he's got a pacemaker or anything. He's quite young, but I think some people have differences of electricity flow in their body compared to like the average human, and so that can be picked up. Again, it's like an EMF, it's like an induction, so you can pick that up on a microphone sometimes. You also get a thing where if someone has quite a high sort of visceral fat content in their body, so not necessarily a large person, but if they've got a lot of fat in their body, that the fat holds water, and that can affect radio frequency transmission, because radio waves don't travel very nicely through water. So you can start to get things like interference, which can be a bit odd. But I think the only one that I've had that was definitely like unexplained was, I mentioned this to Steve, was basically recording scenes for actor showreels from the Central School of Speech and Drama. So we're in the Swiss Cottage pub Swiss Cottage, I guess, and it's a very old pub, and I'm not even sure if it's open anymore. And there's a back room that doesn't.
it's shut down now.
Well, that's a shame, because because it actually looks like a sort of Swiss chalet. It's really unusual. It's a great place, but the back room wasn't really used. And again, I probably set myself on edge a little bit because it felt a little bit creepy. But we're recording a scene. The director shouts "cut." In my headphones, I hear "boop boop," which is the noise that my mixer makes when it cuts. But I've got both my hands on the boom pole, so it's not a lack of concentration. There's no physical way I could have pressed the stop button because both my hands are on the boom pole. So thinking about it logically, I thought, well, do you know what? I've probably imagined beep. I've probably messed up and I haven't actually recorded that take. So I went back into my files and I checked, and I had recorded the take. So as far as I can tell, I rolled, recorded the take, director shouts cut, the stop button was pressed, but not by me. I spoke to the director almost immediately, and I said, look, I'm not saying it's definitely haunted in here, but you shout cut, my mixer cuts. And she went very pale and said that at that moment she saw a figure walk behind me, and I was just like, can we leave, please? Can we just finish and go somewhere else, because that's horrific. I don't know. I mean, we come up with a lot of theories, me and a friend who's technical. We were like, we'd been outside in the sun, we've been outside in the cold. We come into a very warm room. Maybe some condensation got in the mechanism, and maybe the timing of it essentially shorting out. Maybe the timing was coincidence, but I mean, that is pretty weird, isn't it?
That is.
And the fact it happened just after cut, and but they're mixed in with the shadow. Was it a shadow, or was it a person? Was it just a form? The director just saw something.
She described it as being like a shadowy figure. So I think maybe very, very indistinct, very faint, shadowy, but not clear enough that you'd be like, oh, I definitely saw something. You'd be like, that looked like a person, but I must have imagined it. But in combination with me having weird stuff happening, that was enough to make her think, okay, there was a figure. But as far as I was concerned, I got a free assistant for the day because, my hands are full, I'm busy.
Yeah.
I can't do 2 jobs at once, but suddenly I can do 2 jobs because I've got this ghostly apparition that's helping me out. Very weird. Very weird.
And it's never happened before, and never happened since.
No, it's just in that environment.
That just is. This is the thing. So around people we've spoken to say, I don't believe in it. I don't believe in anything paranormal, but this happened. I can't explain it.
Yeah.
Even Gannon, when we were talking to him, he was saying, I don't believe in it. Never, done all these ghost hunts, but where I was in this place and the sort of ball of light, and it touched my skin and burnt me. And then he could hear, and he couldn't describe why this little ball of light was floating around in this dark room and landed on his hand and burned him. And which could be electricity, it could be static, it could be anything, I guess. But he heard cannons being fired in a particular room he was in this old fort, and nobody else at any other place in the fort could actually hear it. And he recorded the audio, so he has the audio of the cannons firing.
Wow.
But nobody else could hear cannons firing anywhere else in the fort. So again, he can't explain that.
To get an actual physical recording of something, because you hear a lot of recordings where what they've done is they've taken the static, like people take a recording of a quiet room and they boost the volume so much that you start to hear just static. It's just self noise in the machinery. And sometimes you can convince yourself it sounds like a voice. And sometimes it does sound like a voice, but sometimes you're like, come on, that's a bit of a stretch. What you've done is you've taken a bit of noise, you've amplified it an insane amount, and you've tried to assign meaning to it. But to actually record something that convincingly sounds like cannons is pretty wild. Unless he happened to be in a castle where they have cannons and they fire them off at 12 for the visitors,
That's it. Apparently it was at night, no cannons being fired. It was in the room where the cannons were fired from.
Cool. I mean, I would be so, I mean, I think I'm still traumatized because I saw Ghostwatch when I was a child, and I would be so freaked out. I mean, I don't know, but even like when we were in Drakelow tunnels, I got a bit freaked out because
it was an unusual place. There was definitely a feeling there, but we were under so much rock. And we've seen this where stone seems to be a conduit for feeling weird feelings and experiences, and that was built under stone. We were just surrounded by it.
I think I've heard people say that because depending on the geology of the area, you can get a lot of magnetic minerals in rocks. Like igneous rocks are full of magnetic minerals. If you think about it like tape, like a tape recorder, something happens in an environment, you record that on a tape recorder, you play it back. Maybe there's a world in which these magnetic minerals are recording things that happened in the past. And I know this is going to sound coming from someone who has a science background and was very cynical for a long time, this probably sounds weird, but I don't believe time is linear. I believe that as humans, without, I don't know if you guys are Deep Space Nine fans, but there's this whole, the Cisco is corporeal, the Cisco is linear. Sorry if that's too niche, but like we experience time in a linear way, but I don't think time is linear. And I think it's entirely possible that sometimes you see something that doesn't quite make sense because maybe you're seeing it in a reference frame that isn't your normal reference frame. And I don't want to get flamed, people saying you're crazy, but I just think there's a lot of things we don't understand. And I genuinely don't think time is linear because sometimes, you know, you meet people in your life and you are certain you've met them before and there's so much happens that makes you believe you have a connection with this person because you feel like you know them. And do I think that's past lives? Probably not. Maybe, I don't know. I'm slightly Buddhist leaning, but I certainly believe there's something, you know, you are the center of your universe and maybe everything else is kind of revolving around you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
with you saying,
sorry, I was going to say, genetic memory. There's the suspicion our memories are written to DNA. They can be passed down, so that can be within us. There's all the other theories which scientists are now saying that there's like the simulation theory. We're all in a computer simulation. There's potential evidence pointing to that could be a possibility. There's so many things now that scientists are looking into as alternatives to just say linear time and space and Big Bang, end of the universe, that's it. But when it eventually happens, but there's so much now people are looking and taking seriously.
Sometimes something good's going to happen. Like I won a raffle prize at a gig once, and before they pulled my number out, I knew. But like, did I? Or maybe I was optimistic, and maybe I would have had that thought hundreds of times before and then forgotten because it never came true. Whereas that time I was like, I know I'm going to win. I'm going to win that record. I know I'm going to win. And then I felt slightly embarrassed because I felt like I'd somehow influenced the outcome. Which is nonsense.
That's another theory, isn't it? That we can do that. We can influence outcomes by our positivity or negativity.
Was writing on his hand, wasn't he? Noel Edmonds was drawing like little symbols on his hands because he was asking the universe for stuff. I find that incredibly. I know I made a comment earlier about your universe revolves around you, but I don't mean like the whole universe revolves around you. I mean just like your world is obviously revolving around you. I think people like Noel Edmonds think the actual universe revolves around them. Therefore, if they want something, they can ask the universe for it and manifest it.
And I do believe you can do that to a degree. I really do. I think especially if you're negative, then you don't get anything.
It's true.
If you lose any kind of desire to influence anything in a positive way, then things will just get worse. And
I'll tell you, my last
start changing.
My last manifestation. This is so mundane, but it was perfect. I'm very bougie now. I've just had a wood burning stove fitted. There's log stores in the garden, but what I really needed was a rack to raise them off the ground so the logs are not sitting on damp concrete when it rains. I know this is really boring, but it's so weirdly specific. I was walking home up the main road and there's a skip outside a shop on my way home, and there were 3 racks in it that are exactly the same size as my log store.
Yeah.
So I just took them, and then I look mad because I'm walking home carrying these racks, but I'm like,
perfect.
The universe has delivered me log racks. Isn't that so weird?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying we should write a paper on this and be like, here's evidence for the paranormal, but people try and manifest world peace, happiness, wealth. I just manifested some slightly tatty racks I could put my logs on. I was very happy with that. That's a good outcome.
But I think that's where the manifestation does work, is if you look for something that is achievable and is something you want, then naturally you're going to be looking out for that exact thing. You're actually going to be trying to achieve that thing that you want. So it could be that you didn't need those and you probably wouldn't have even bothered looking in the skip that you walked past. But the fact that you needed it, you happened to look in the skip and go, I need that, and then brilliantly it was the perfect thing for you.
I feel like that really sums my life up. I'm never going to be rich. I'm never going to be like hugely successful. I'm never going to be setting the world on fire. But when I really need it, the universe will deliver stuff to me in
Yeah.
a skip. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'll take it. I'll take it. It's a low bar, but I'll take it.
Yeah. But you think you're right. I mean, it's like to say, I was just talking to my son the other day, and I said, look, you have to realize that you're worth more than, you don't have to be living in a bedsit. You're 26. You're a musician. You've just had your #1. You can play music. You're so good. Just start imagining that you need and deserve and will have more and more success. But I told him I was the opposite. I grew up in a family that didn't really have much because there were 6 of us and Dad was the only one working. So we didn't really have much. And I grew up thinking I wasn't worth money and I was never going to be rich. And I grew up and it never happened. I never got money. Even when I was self-employed, I couldn't charge properly because I didn't think I was worth it. So I was never asking for the right money. So I never achieved that. And I think it's because I was manifesting on the wrong level. I was just imagining myself as just not deserving things.
Yeah.
And I think that did have my state of mind of how I was absolutely convinced I was never going to be rich. I was never going to have money. And it just, I'm still struggling today. But that's what I said to my boy, just focus the other way around.
Bring positivity into your life.
Money and positivity, and you'll get
But
it.
I think also if you don't feel worthy and you feel sad or whatever, you're more likely to notice the negative things that happen too. I mean, if you go throughout the day, there'll be countless tiny frustrations and countless tiny victories. But if you're feeling a bit down, you feel like life's sort of kicking you anyway. On a bad day, all those tiny frustrations can feel like a really big deal. And it can be that you're overwhelmed, you're burnt out, you're tired, whatever, and then it just all becomes a bit too much. And it doesn't mean that you've had shitty luck. It just means that you feel so trapped in that mindset that what you're really focusing on is the negativity. And again, I'm not going to say, oh, everyone should think positive and they'll be all right, because let's face it, life is hard and a lot of us are struggling. But I think if you can take those little victories, you do feel better for it. I don't know. I don't know how your experience of, like, obviously you've experienced grief. Does that impact how, because you're obviously doing this podcast about things beyond the world that we understand and beyond the world that we maybe can explain. Has experiencing grief changed how you feel about things like the afterlife, for example?
Did you know it has? Like I said, this ghost hunt on last weekend, there's everybody talking. My dad told me before he died, he told me that he'd done a Ouija board and spoken to his brother. Nobody in the group knew about his brother because he was young when he lost him. Never really told anybody. And that's why he didn't want me doing this podcast, because he was so freaked out by the fact that he spoke to his brother when he didn't believe in it. But then going along to this podcast, to this ghost hunt, and everyone's doing Ouija boards and saying they're hearing voices and people calling them names. And it's like, I just sitting there thinking it would be so nice if there was some way to prove it, but you can't. I just, I'm not religious in any way, so I don't believe in, the traditional religious afterlife, but there's so many, like I say, so much science we haven't discovered yet, which could reveal anything. So there's always a hope that there is something else. It may not be heaven and hell, but there may be another existence afterwards. Who knows? We just don't know. I used to think it's like, absolutely not. It's just, this is silly. But then after reading sort of scientific studies and more theories and sort of evidence and all sorts of things that's coming to light when you actually look into it, it's like, maybe there is a possibility. Maybe this isn't just it. But yeah, and it's funny because grief this time around, when my mum died, I lost my mind completely. I actually went into a deep, deep depression and ended up having to move from where we lived to the other side, move 200 miles away just to be away from the memories. But losing my dad this time, I think it's, I had time with him before he died. So I was back to work within 2 weeks, which surprised me. And but I decided I had to be positive. I wasn't going to let losing him. And I think this podcast has really helped because, it makes you realize that everybody is trying to deal with this. I think the tough part is, again, dealing with that feeling of your own mortality. And realizing your dad's only 25 years older than you, and it's like the last 30 years have just flown past. The next 20 years are going to fly past. And
well, that's
like,
the thing.
how little time you have left.
I say we experience time linearly, but we don't really, do we? I mean, we not linearly in terms of speed, for example. If you think about it, like when you're a kid, if it's like endless summers, and then when you're an adult, you blink and like it's this time around. It's partly because of COVID as well. Like the COVID years just seem to have, for a lot of people, it's taken a chunk of time out of their lives, and suddenly it's like, where did that 3 years go? I don't know. It's actually quite scary, but no, I think you're right. And this is really cheesy, but I rewatched the film Ghost at New Year, and
I love that.
but there's a when he's finally, you know, going to heaven or whatever, when he turns to his wife and he says, "You take it with you, the love." And I know that's quite a cheesy line, but I actually, like, my mum's got this theory that that's what heaven is. It's like, as long as people remember you and you've had, you know, there's still love for you that exists in the world. So it's not heaven on like some sort of spiritual level, but you are remembered and you're cared about, even though you're not there anymore. And I think that's actually quite a beautiful way of looking at it.
Have you watched Coco, the
No.
Pixar film? I recommend Disney Coco. Pixar's Coco. It's about basically, as long as people remember you, you're alive. You still can live. You live on, and it's basically, you know, obviously Mexicans really celebrate the dead, Day of the Dead, and you know, celebrate death through a celebration, and basically go to the afterlife. And when people forget you, that's when you die. That's when you truly die. So I do recommend, if you can see Coco. I watch that quite often with people my own age, and we're all sitting there in tears.
Is this for kids? It sounds hardcore.
Yeah, it is. It's when Pixar used to make good films. It was, but it's even as a 55-year-old, I will sit there and sob through it. And it's you know, a very interesting way of looking at death and afterlife. And you know, as long as you remain in the memories of the people around you, then you'll always be there.
Which is really lovely.
It's also because you like feeling un pollo loco. That's one of the songs in Coco. It's a whole song where it's like, I'm feeling un pollo loco. Yeah, that's one of the songs in it.
It'd be good for my Spanish lessons then, my Duolingo.
Oh,
I've no idea what it means.
A little crazy, un poco loco.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. I know now. That's me learned something today. You said about grief and this podcast and paranormal and things. I think when I've spoken to people, and we've had this conversation recently about psychics and clairvoyance and so on and so forth, and a lot of people do dismiss them and will call them out for being charlatans and what have you. However, there are people that once they've experienced grief will look at them as a sign of comfort, because they do want to suddenly speak to the person that they've lost, because they feel that they've got that unfinished business and what have you. So for some people, those things and that thought of there's somebody still there and this person is here talking and being you know, a link between the afterworld and where we are now, this mortal realm. And there are people that do take a lot of solace in that, who might not have ever believed in such a thing, but then suddenly they do, and they will start visiting people to talk and deal with their grief and their emotions and feel something.
It's tricky though, isn't it? Because if that medium knows that they are fake and they're manipulating people, I would rather that someone who was going through grief went to a counsellor, rather than having essentially be lied to for money. Because you know, I'm not saying all mediums are cynical charlatans, but you know, there is definitely an element of that. And you know, whether they know it's bullshit and they're exploiting grieving people, whether they genuinely believe they have a gift and they're deluded, or alternatively, maybe they really do have a gift and we just don't understand it. I mean, they're the options, right? But if they are cynically exploiting someone, even if that person finds it helpful, I would rather they went to a counsellor. Having said that, my mum went to a medium in sort of late 70s, early 80s, and some of the stuff that, so like my dad lost his leg in 1970, late 1978, and I was born in 1979, so it was a really tough time for the family, because my dad could have died. Mum had a difficult pregnancy, so she could have died, which meant I probably would, the whole, we could have lost the whole family. But where my dad's accident was right by Tranmere Rovers football ground, weirdly. And when my mum went to the medium said to her, what does this set of traffic lights at Tranmere Rovers mean to you? And my mum was absolutely gobsmacked, because that is such a random thing. Like, how could she have known? Unless, maybe they had the names of everyone who was coming in advance, and she went through news just in case there was any, she could have been in the library going through the microfiche. Let's see if there's any news on these people. But that seems like a stretch. So I don't know.
That's a lot of effort, isn't it?
It's a lot of effort. And it's not like Mum was chatting about it before she went in, because, sometimes these people have accomplices who feed them information, don't they? And they've got an earpiece or whatever. But even you see someone like Darren Brown, and he's not psychic, he's just terrifyingly smart. And even though he's telling you this is bullshit and he's showing you how it's done, the amount of times I've been watching Darren Brown and been like, no, he's clearly just a wizard. He just knows things. This is supernatural. So even when someone is presenting you with the evidence that this is not real, it looks real, and it's actually deeply unsettling, I think. But how do they know some of these things that are so specific? That's what surprises me.
Who was it? Was it somebody we spoke to? It probably was Paul Gannon. Was talking about a psychic who would sit on stage with headphones on, listening to music whilst people came in. Or that's what they would look like. They were listening to music with headphones on,
but they're probably being fed information.
Yeah, because now it's so easy to find information. Most people book online. Their email addresses will be there. You do a search, even Facebook, for people in that area. You've got that information. It's so easy now. But the trouble is, you might have one genuine.
Well.
Yeah, that's it. But it's like everything. If we're UFO sightings, cryptids, ghost sightings, you may have one genuine one and 5,000 fakes, which makes you then forget, don't believe in the genuine one.
Yeah.
So I asked you a question earlier about have you experienced anything where you haven't been planning on doing things, where you said about like that some of the stuff that you've picked up auditory wise and sound wise, where it's not been expected. Now, have you ever worked on anything where you were technically supposed to be looking for ghosts and what have you, and then detected something weird, or conversely didn't detect anything at all, and things are put in post-production because of television and media and how it works?
Not personally, no. I've not worked on that sort of show. A friend of mine worked on Most Haunted for years, and he said he never saw anything, like nothing at all, that would in any way convince him that ghosts exist or there was unexplained out there. To him, it was more just about, it's a mindset, and it's almost like a hysteria. And I think if you ever watch it, you see like how wound up Yvette gets, and she's like, oh my God. So that was sort of secondhand experience. In terms of, do they actually make it look worse, like doctor it? I don't know if they do. I think it's more just like, you're shooting in low light, which looks a bit creepy. You, as we talked about earlier, you're amplifying sounds to make them sound more dramatic. I don't think it's strictly dishonest, but I think you are setting up an environment where it feels a little bit unsettling and a little bit creepy. And then when you've got presenters who are very edgy and they'll scream if they hear a noise or see a shadow or whatever, then I think, as humans, our emotional state is quite we're quite influenced by people around us. So if you're in an environment where lots of people are freaked out, it's quite hard to not be freaked out yourself, I think. Or like yesterday I was at a football match. You can't get a better embodiment of collective mood than a football match. You feel the joy, you feel the pain, whatever. I think with something like a paranormal investigation, if you've got a big group of people, I mean, psychology tells us it's very hard to go against a group. It's not conscious, but like subconsciously, if everyone's feeling a certain way, you're probably going to go along with it. I mean, maybe less so again for neurodivergent people, but because we aren't quite so susceptible to peer pressure. But it's not even just peer pressure. You do set a baseline of emotional state, I think, when you're in a group, and people will kind of be hovering around that baseline.
Well, there was that psychological experiment that they did with monkeys, where they had a group of monkeys in a cage and a ladder, and at the top of the ladder was a bunch of bananas. And every time a monkey went to climb the ladder, they squirted them with water. So therefore, the monkeys went climbing the ladder means this horrible experience of being squirted
Yeah.
with water, and then when all the monkeys were then conditioned to that and stopped climbing the ladder, they then removed one of the monkeys and put a monkey that hadn't experienced that in.
Yeah.
And then every time that monkey went near the ladder, they would then fight that monkey. And then they then kept replacing monkeys until every single monkey that was in the cage was one that was never squirted with water.
Right.
But none of them went anywhere near the ladder, because when they did go near the ladder, they would all get beat up for it, but they didn't know why. And then Darren Brown did a similar thing, which was a bit nicer than squirting monkeys with water. He actually got a room full of people. And to start with, they were actors. And every time a bell went ding, they all had to stand up. And then when it went ding again, they had to sit down again. And they then slowly replaced actors with real people that had no idea that this was a whole setup. And eventually there was no actors in the room, but everybody in the room knew that when they heard the bell, they had to stand up, and when they heard it again, they sat down again. And it is that thing of that peer pressure and that learned behavior of, because you don't necessarily ask why, you just see that everybody is doing it and you try and conform.
Yeah,
You go,
you don't want to stand out.
yeah. And I do remember the Darren Brown thing. There was actually a lady that went in who didn't stand up when it went. So he actually got the producers to go and get her and be like, oh, we're ready for you for another thing, and actually removed her just because she would then destroy the experiment, sort of thing, of showing that. So even Darren Brown has things where things don't necessarily go right, and they prove that not everybody conforms to society and societal pressures. But yeah,
I'm absolutely fascinated because I saw him live. I saw Darren Brown live and doing his act in Plymouth, and it was amazing. He actually got everybody who wanted to. Well, he made everybody for it. Tony, have you ever seen Darren Brown live?
yes.
No,
Have you
I'd
seen one
like
of his
to
shows?
though. He's kind of
Okay.
amazing.
Oh, it really is. He got everyone to like interlock their fingers, and there was a load of people after. I can't remember what it made them do. He made them do something, and they couldn't unlock their fingers. So these people who he had convinced they couldn't unlock their fingers, he got them all to go up front, and then he basically just looked at everybody, and he was just chatting, and he picked like 10 people, and he got them all up on stage. So he knew these people were already they were very likely to be influenced by whatever he was doing. Then just by chatting, he could decide which ones he was going to use, and he took them all up, and he managed to brainwash and hypnotize and convince them all to do stuff but without even question. There was no question. And the guy who was left, he was doing things where he just was having entire bits of his memory blanked. He was doing things and not remembering at all anything about it. So for as far as he was concerned, this magic trick, there was something in a box he was holding and he was sealing it tight. And then suddenly the thing that was in there was over the other side of the room and it just appeared. And he was like, you could see his face. He was completely blown away by the fact that this thing that was in his hand in his box was empty. And it's like, but he knows the solid object was in there. Now it's gone. It can't go anywhere else. So confused. But he got him he convinced him that just that part of his memory was completely blocked out. And it was only like small commands. We didn't barely even notice what he was doing.
Yeah.
And it'll say afterwards when we were leaving, we saw the guy. Everybody was saying, you're obviously a plant because no one can be this. But people in the audience were saying that they hadn't seen him do it. Basically, take out from himself, take out what was in the box, go and put it in the other box himself, set it all up, then go back, stand where he was standing, seal up the box again. But there were people in the audience who also were affected by it, and they didn't see him do it either. They could see
He's
just
so
the
good
trick
at
happening.
misdirection. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I worked with the guy he picked. I know he wasn't a plant. He was actually just, he invited me to go with him and his family, but he just happened to be the one that he picked and was on stage and doing all these things. And he even today does not recall any of it. And he went backstage with Darren Brown at the interval, and that's obviously where he did his hypnotherapy, or hypnotizing, or whatever, or the suggestion, whatever he did, because he doesn't remember what happened behind stage either. Yeah. And even to this day, he doesn't know what happened, what Darren Brown did, but he knows who you can influence and how to influence people so well.
His understanding of how human brains work is just remarkable.
I guess going on the whole Derren Brown and power suggestion and all of that, have you ever been anywhere where the power of suggestion of that thing, you said about the tunnels a couple of times, where you yourself, and I know you've said earlier that you think very much black and white with things. Have you ever been sort of led into the way of, oh, this is a creepy things, and then you've then felt creepy things? Or have you gone the complete opposite, where you've gone in and going, well, this is trying to force me to think creepily, so I'm not going to think about anything creepy? Or is there something completely else that you experience?
It's a bit of an odd one because I'm quite easy to freak out. So in an environment that's a little bit spooky, I might be a bit freaked out, but I don't feel like I'm massively suggestible. And I think, again, sort of my experience of neurodiversity means I either don't really care for peer pressure because I don't see the point in it, but also I might just not even notice it because I'm very, very attuned to people's feelings and emotions, but I'm not very attuned to how I'm supposed to behave in a certain situation. So I think in some ways that protects me to some degree from peer pressure. But having said that, autistic people can be quite vulnerable in the sense that you end up going along with a situation just because it's happening and you're like, I don't actually like this, but I spend so much of my time masking to fit in that I'm kind of going along with it anyway, even though I don't want to. And it's a very complicated and contradictory experience, I think. But I would say I'm not that suggestible. However, a friend did hypnotize me when I was in high school, and I didn't like that. It was we were probably only about 15, and he'd been learning hypnosis, and I actually found myself getting, like you were talking about the fingers not being able to separate. I got quite locked in, and I felt like I couldn't move. And then I could hear the slight note of panic in his voice because he wasn't really expecting it to work necessarily.
He hadn't done the part to bring you out of it yet. They hadn't learned that part.
No, and it was quite unsettling. And after some of my friends were like, "You're an idiot. You shouldn't have let him do that." And I was like, "Well, I didn't think it bloody worked." I don't know. It's a weird one. I don't think I'm that suggestible, but the one time someone tried to hypnotize me, it did actually work.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. That's been a great episode. Very fascinating. Lots of things covered there. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. I hope it wasn't too derailed by my random excursions.
Perfect for us.
Yeah, it's normal for us to start talking about one thing and then go off on about a million different tangents. It's just part of the show now. But yes, thank you very much. And do go and check out Chris's music on her Instagram account, and do go and give Chris some love on her social medias, and do search for us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, so on and so forth. Do give us some love there. Do give us a rating, subscribe, comment on something. We're now on Good Pods. Give us a comment or two on there. And if you want to join our Discord, do go to our website. You can find the link to our Discord and join us for a little chat on there. And our Patreon for extra stuff, including the video of this, which is the full unedited version of this. So do check out our Patreon as well. So thank you for joining us this week, guys, and thank you to Chris for being here with us too.
Thank you, Chris.
All right.
That was very pro. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Boo-Foons, mystery investigators.